Hello guys, it's Francesco
and Sofia from AVASCOT.
In this tutorial we are going to explore our new Groom shader for Unreal Engine.
The shader is based on our techniques and workflows we have developed while grooming characters for VFX projects. It's designed to give you flexible, high-quality control over hair and fur rendering, with art direction friendly parameters both for cinematic and interactive workflows.
We will divide the tutorial into two sections. First, some theory, then we will apply what we have learned to an actual groom work. Alright, here we are in the groom test scene. As soon as you open the shader, you will see the main tab. This is where we define how many areas our groom will have. A groom area is simply a region that differs in color compared to another one. For example, in this reference we could define three different partitions: blonde fur, dark fur, white fur. By activating each area, the related option will appear, along with a dedicated set of parameters. At the top, you will see a texture input that controls the placement of each area. This texture can contain up to 4 masks. You can paint the different areas in each channel, red, green, blue and alpha. This means you can have up to 5 different areas if you include the base area. In this example, we have some groom down here, and on the top we have a texture that we are using as fur mask. You can see that in the moment I activate the area 2, these parameters are displayed, and in the base color we are going to change the color of this area that of course corresponds to the red channel we painted. In the moment we are going to activate the area 3, we are going to have these new parameters and we can change the color of this area. That's nice. So we can go with the area 4, this line, and as well area 5, that is the alpha, that of course is not displayed in this texture. We also have some blend parameters here that can help in blending the different layers. So if you can see here, we can add these nice effects, and as well we can push them to create a more contrasty look and outline. You can paint this texture in any software you prefer. For example, here I'm using Mari to paint each different channel and merging them together with this node and adding as well the alpha and exporting them. Just remember when you import it in Unreal to set the texture compression to mask. The probability mask is one of the most interesting features of the shader and one of the key elements that will make your groom look more realistic. In real fur, color transition rarely fades smoothly like a gradient. Instead, different color fibers gradually mix together. In offline rendering workflow, such as Arnold, we typically use attributes to control this type of color transition. With the AVASCOT GROOM shader, you don't need any of that. We built a system that lets you control this behavior using a single texture, the same fur mask used for the areas. When you paint with full white, you get the full number of fibers from the new area. As you paint with darker values, fewer fibers from the new areas are applied, and more fibers from the previous area will be visible. In the example scene, you can clearly see how much the painted value affects the probability distribution in the groom. This control, combined with the color mask that we will see later, gives you a huge amount of flexibility for grooming look development. You can always switch between using the probability feature and the typical blend. Blend gives a smoother transition, while probability creates a more contrasty look. So let's play with the shader. In the base section, we can decide the color of the hair. So I want some purple. And here you can do some tweaks in the hue, saturation, and brightness. Things get more interesting when you enable Use Base Color Variation. The goal of this option is to introduce a soft color variation on top of your base groom color. If you look at real animal reference, individual hairs are never all exactly the same color. Each hair varies slightly, and that subtle difference is what creates a more natural look. In this step, we are doing exactly that by adjusting these parameters. So, if we play with the darker amount, you can see better in this side of the example, we're going to get darker hair. And with this slider, we can play with the intensity of them. With a lighter amount, we are going to get lighter hair. And here we can play as well with the intensity of this lighter one. Here we can pick a different color. So for example, I'm going to pick a green color, and if you see, we're going to get green hair. That's nice. So this section is used just to have a subtle variation. Here you can control the specular and the roughness of the fur, and you can also add a soft roughness variation to break up uniform highlights and make the fur feel more organic. I suggest adjusting your viewport lighting so you can clearly see how this value affects the grooming. So if you go in the buffer visualization and set to roughness, we activated the roughness variation, and if we push the slider, you can see that we are creating a nice variation, and here we can choose the actual value of the roughness variation. And with this slider, you can add just a soft variation, so each strands that you pick, they have a slightly different value, just to create a more organic look. In the color mask section, you can assign a texture to tweak colors inside an existing area. We can see how it works in this example. So here I assigned a texture where I painted the green channel, the red channel, and assigned a noise in the blue channel. This one is the area for the red, this one is the area for the green, and this is the area for the blue. And there is also the area for the alpha, if you want to paint that. So for example, we go in the area of the green, and we can play with the brightness. So if you see, we're going to affect the area that we paint in the texture. And for example, let's go in the blue, and we can assign this nice variation that match, of course, the noise. This tab is where we control the actual per hair color variation across the groom. Includes parameters similar to the base color variation we saw earlier, along with additional controls for more precision. So the variation amount will control the number of modified hair that will be visible. So after you set a number here, you can tweak the hue, saturation, brightness of the hair. So for example, for now I'm setting a strong variation to 0. And if you see, if I set here this one to the maximum, we are going to have 100% of the hair with this modification. We don't want that, we set just a few numbers, and we are going to set just a slight variation. Okay. The soft blend parameters add subtle color variation to each single strand, and the variation blend controls the overall intensity of this variation for the entire section. You can use the variation blend mask, where you can assign a custom texture to control where this variation appears. For example, painting black in the mask will remove this strand variation in the specific area. The fiber variation 02 works in the same way, with one key difference. In this case, the color modification happens after the root and tip color section, which we will look at next. The root color parameter will let you modify the color of the base of your hair. So here we can choose a darker color, and here we can tweak as well the hue, saturation and brightness. Here you can choose the position of this area, and here you can choose the contrast. So a more smoother one or a more contrasty transition. Let's keep this contrasty one because I want to show you the next parameter, that is the root length variation, that will give a nice variation to the length of the color of each fiber. And here we can add a soft blend variation to each fiber. Here you can pick the number of fiber affected by the root adjustment, and here you can blend the overall effect. The tip color section works in exactly the same way, but affects the tips of the fiber instead. As soon as you start your groom work, we recommend opening the CVC asset. This will give you access to useful control variables to make your groom look better. When you import your groom in Unreal, make sure it includes the correct attributes. The shader will need the root UV to work correctly. So let's start working on a real groom asset. Here we have our African wild dog. Before we jump into playing with the shader, it's better to define the different area first. So in our reference, we can see that there are mainly two areas, the blonde fair and the black one. So we will work first on the blonde fair, and then we will define the black area painting a fur mask. So to begin, we will first choose a base color for the blonde area. And then we can tweak a bit this parameter to have fine control. Then I want to add a soft color variation to the color, and we are going to add a bit of darker hair. Here we can choose the intensity, and as well some lighter one. So we are going to have a nice variation as base. Here we can play a bit with the roughness, and I'm going to switch in the roughness view to add a bit of variation to our roughness. So here I'm going to add the variation, and here I'm going to choose the color of this variation. So each hair is going to have a soft value variation. Nice. I'm going back to the lid, and I'm going to play a bit with the general roughness. Perfect. Then I want to play with the main fiber variation, where we are going to have much more control in the variation of the hair. And here I want to set some quite darker hair, but I want really few of them. So I'm going to set the slider like this, and we can add as well a soft variation to each hair. And here I want again some lighter one, probably with a little tint. Nice. Then we are going to play with the root color. We activate this box and we set the brightness to a darker value. And from here we can choose the position. Here we can choose the contrast of the transition. And here we can add some length variation to the root color. And here a soft blend. We can compare the result, and it's already looking much nicer. We are going to compare the result, and we can see that with the root color the clumps are much more visible and defined. Let's add some tip color. Of course we want some brighter color, and here we can choose the position. The contrast are the same setting of the root color. Nice. After we play with all of these parameters, we can jump back in the base section and tweak the color. Now that we have a base for the blonde fur, we can start to work on the black one. So let's make this mask. Of course you can use any software you like to paint this texture. Here we're using Mari. So here we set up an RGBA node where we can paint 4 different masks. In this case we're going to need just one. So by default, when we paint white, this mask will affect the new area. But as I prefer to paint white where there is the blonde and lighter fur and keep black the darker area, we will flip this mask in the shader. So let's begin. So I just imported the texture in Unreal. We can see in the red channel the area we paint. And I set the compression to mask. Back in the shader, I activate the area 2 and I plug the texture here. We flip the mask as we painted it inverted. And we can see that we have the new area activated. We can see also that there are new sections here. So we go in the base color, and of course we set a darker color, not black but a kind of really dark brown. we can start to work on this section. So as before, I want some base color variation with some darker hair and some lighter one. We can play a bit with the roughness and add some variation on it. And after, we can add some variation in the single hair. So we can make some really dark hair and some lighter one. Great. We play a bit with the root. And as well, we add some tip color. Nice. After this, we go to play with the overall values. At this stage, you can see that, of course, this mask is quite strong. He jumped from black to blonde, and instead in the reference we have this nice transition, and we have a lot of tiny little lighter fibers all around the black area. So let's start refining the fur mask. I'm going to pick a darker value and paint in this area. So basically in this area we're going to have a tiny percentage of blonde hair. I'm going to paint also some darker value in this area. As we can see, there is a nice mix of darker and brighter fur. And also I'm painting here some lighter values, just to have a bit of variation. As soon we update the texture, we can see that some area works much better. Other area still needs a bit of work. So I really like the amount of fiber that we have in this area. So I'm going just to pick this value here. And I'm going to paint other area where I want the same effect. We can also blend the area to have a smoother transition. In the neck, I think we need much more blonde hair, so we're going to pick a brighter value. We can see that works much better after this new update. We can see that the transition is smoother, and as well the neck area has a nice fur variation closer to the reference. At this point, I would like to just play a bit with the color of the darker fur, maybe pushing the brightness a bit down. And I think it's starting to work pretty nice. I would like to add also some white and brighter hair to the black one. So we go in the fiber variation too, that is where typically I play with the brighter hair. And we can set the brightness up, and yes, we have some nice fur. And I would like also to set the saturation down, because I want white hair, not light brown. Nice. You can see that with just a few tweaks, it already looks much better. So I did an update to the fur mask. You can see that it looks really messy, but is giving a really nice variation to the blending of the two areas. So that's the new result, and we can see that there is much more variation, and as well there are a lot of groom details more visible. That's great. But what if we want to add some color variation inside a specific area? So for example, if you see here, the fur is a bit brighter, and there are also these white patches. These white patches, for example, we could create a different area. But in this tutorial, we won't add a new area because I want to show you a new feature of the shader, that is the color mask section. So in Mari, I create another texture, and I paint in the red channel this area where I want brighter fur. And then in the green channel, I paint the area where I want these more white patches. And as well, I create a noise that I plug in the blue channel to give just an overall variation. Back in Unreal, I import the texture and I set its compression to mask, and I plug it here. So after I plug it, we can play with the mask of the red channel, and you can see that we're going to get brighter hair in this area. That's really nice. In the green channel, we're going to push the brightness because we want these areas really white, and we are going to set the saturation low, so we are going to get these nice white patches. In the blue channel, we can just set a bit of brightness and also a bit of saturation, just to give an overall variation. We can also change the view if you want, adjust a bit. Now I'm noticing that the dark fur of the body is a bit darker than the one of the head, that is a bit brownish. Oh, we can do that, of course, with another color mask, but this time applied to the second area. So in this new texture, I paint in the red channel the area that I want darker, so in this case the ears and the body. And in the green channel I didn't paint anything, and in the blue channel, as before, I just set a noise just to have a little variation. Back in area, we check the box of the color mask for the area 2, and this new section will be visible. We can set the brightness of the red channel to a darker value. Great. And as well add a bit of variation in the blue channel. So after tweaking the parameters a bit more, this is the result we got. It's quite a jump from the first version and already very close to the reference. So that's it for this introduction to the shader. I hope you will enjoy playing with it. Feel free to experiment and share your result.